Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Borat is back with Borat number 2, Subsequent Moviefilm, and we're going to talk about all of it right now. Hey, what's going on, everyone? How you guys doing? Matt Jarbo here, $3 Theater. So last night, I sat down to watch Borat Subsequent Moviefilm with my girlfriend right after the presidential debate. Oddly enough, Amazon dropped the movie during the debate. I thought that was really weird, but they were doing some online watch party that I was invited to. But then I'm like, it's just going to be online. Like, as soon as it's over, there's no real point in going to it. Besides, it was apparently a gigantic crap show. With the servers going down, and it was kind of dumb, and I'm okay with missing it. I wanted to watch the future of our country, like what was going to be maybe the deciding factor for a lot of people. However, Borat 2 is a perfect follow-up to the debate. If you wanted to watch something that would make you laugh, make you kind of cringe, and I don't mean that in like a lighthearted way, I mean that in a truly Sacha Baron Cohen type way. I was blown away by how much I was cringing. But not laughing as much, actually, as the first film. I remember laughing a lot more at the first movie. It might be that it was 14 years ago. It might be that it was fresh. It was new. It was different. And in the subsequent decade and a half, we've had a lot of very nice, how much, a lot of those kind of jokes, a lot of that kind of pop culture reference, which actually was brought up in the movie, which I thought was kind of fascinating. And that's why Borat had to do a lot of the disguises that he did in order to not be recognized this time around, which is interesting when you think about the concept of popularity of pop culture and how notable someone's look might be, especially when in the very first movie, he predominantly shot it in the lower, like in the southern states, as a way to not only expose some ignorance and some racism, because that's what he was doing in that movie, but also people wouldn't really know him there from Ali G or whatever else he might be in. Whereas in more maybe liberal cities, he would have maybe been known. And that was something at the time that they were talking about. But now, because of all these years later, oh no, he's highly recognized, and he has to do a lot of different, disguises as a way to make sure that no one can see him, with the exception of one scene in particular. So the story is he has to go back to the United States in order to give a monkey to Mike Pence as a way to maybe hopefully get his country back in good standing, because they've been the laughingstock of the world for the last 15 years. And he gets out of jail finally for it. And he goes and he meets his daughter for the first time, Tuta. And she ends up sneaking into the monkey cage and goes over to America, where she ends up needing to survive like 3 months, really, by eating the monkey. It's kind of a dumb gag, but it's just a way to explain the story. And from there, they go and they try to give her a makeover, and teach her, manner and etiquette, very similar to what happened in the first movie. We're trying to teach Borat manner and etiquette before delivering her to Mike Pence at CPAC 2020. Now, the movie itself, to me, feels very much like it was shot very quickly. It does. It feels very, very, very rushed. And I think it was. I think they had this idea to get this movie out by election time. I think that even though coronavirus plays a big part of it, I don't think that they were ultimately planning on coronavirus being a key factor in it, but it was, because a lot of the places that they go to, people aren't wearing a mask. And I know in the South, that's a big thing. People aren't wearing masks very often. I get that. I see that. I understand that. But I feel like a lot of that was shot pre-coronavirus, and they just went back and they tweaked a bit of it in order to look like it was going to be, set in this particular time. Like it was going to be set during this time when we are dealing with this virus, as he likes to call it. But through the course of it, they do a lot of cringy stuff, but it really is kind of a love story between him and his daughter, which I thought was actually really sweet. Now that I have 2 daughters of my own, I thought that was actually really, really sweet. I was surprised. I was like, oh yeah, wow, that's kind of cool. It's about him learning to accept his daughter and her coming into her own, and her realizing that she doesn't need a man to control her life, and that he doesn't need to read this manual that was clearly written by gypsies that would say that if a woman touches her vagina, it sucks her in with vaginal dentata. So, that was one of the things that they were making fun of. And they were also making fun quite a bit of Trump's America. And I know a lot of people who support the president are not going to like this movie as much because they're going to view it as being exceptionally mean-spirited. However, this wasn't like a Jordan Klepper clip from The Daily Show. This was him actually using like a lot of their own words against them. There's this scene where he ends up like going somewhere. They don't say where it is. And this is where the movie falls apart in some aspects, is like the amount of travel that he does and how he gets around very quickly. Like he goes from Olympia, Washington, which is the city I live in, to Manhattan, New York. It's very, very, very quickly with like no passage of time. In fact, 2 hours is how much time he has to go from what they establish is the Northwest to, or well, somewhere in the South, maybe, but he had literally just left the Northwest and then went someplace else and then was in Manhattan 2 hours later. So there's a lot of time jump you have to suspend disbelief on. And I know that that's kind of a weird thing to say here, mostly because when you think about time jumps in movies, it's not that big of a deal, but we're talking about a documentary that is based in reality. So having those kind of very odd time jumps and distance jumps just really takes the audience out of it, at least for me, predominantly because of the Olympia scene specifically. So that whole thing is he goes into quarantine with a couple of these guys that you would think are from the South because they sound like they're from the South, but they are magically in Olympia, Washington. And he stays there. And this is true. He stays there for 5 days. And this is real. He actually had to stay in character for 5 days during this scene where it's just this montage where he gets to know these guys and they're telling him all about QAnon and they're telling him all about all this other stuff. And he pulls out the manual from the government that's talking about how a woman gives birth and it's two doctors performing more or less the Eiffel Tower on her, like a high five over the back sort of thing. And they're like, this is not how it works. And he's like, but you believe it, you know, this is what they say is real. So you have to believe it. And he's showing them, you know, these are guys who believe in QAnon and they believe in all that nonsense, all the Pizzagate conspiratorial nonsense. They believe in all this. And he comes out there and he just kind of hands this book to them that he believes, and that they're like, no, that's not how this works. That's not real. He's like, no, but it's written down. It's real, you know, and they clearly don't get it. But then he ends up like being friends with them and going to this rally in Olympia, where he actually was here a few months ago. And at the time, we didn't know Borat 2 was being filmed. I thought it was like This Is America season 2. But he comes out to this like 3%er rally in downtown Olympia at Heritage Park, which I drive by all the time. And he's out there singing a song, you know, and I'm sure you probably know, like, you know, Chop Them Up Like the Saudis Do, in reference to Jamal Khashoggi, who died a couple years ago at the hands of Saudis at the Turkish embassy, or the Saudi embassy in Turkey. And like, you know, all this stuff, he's just exposing people's, you know, inner bias and their racism. And he's doing it in a way that they're not seeing, but we as the audience are seeing. And then of course is like that whole Rudy Giuliani scene was crazy. I do think it was a bit blown out of proportion. You know, they had insinuated that he was reaching down his pants in order to maybe perhaps fondle his own, and then maybe get a little bit of, but but his excuse was it looked like, you know, that he was tucking in his shirt, and it did look to me like he was also tucking in his shirt, to be fair, but he was clearly flirting. And I think had there actually, you know, not come in and stopped it, he maybe would have tried initiating something. And that is where I think the filmmakers ultimately decided that it would be best to not allow it to go that path, to not allow it to go that way, to sit down and go, okay, hold on, like, don't let it get too far, because they don't want like a major incident on their hands. And Rudy Giuliani did contact the New York Police Department to report the situation, but I think it is being kind of blown up bigger than what it really is. That being said, it's still interesting to me nonetheless, like that he was in that situation and that he allowed himself to go back into the room, and he did touch her lower back. He patted her on the lower back, not her butt, but like right above her butt by her hip. And you know, as she was pulling off his microphone, like it's an interesting scene, but you can tell like it is being framed a certain way. And then, you know, again, the movie ends and they no longer blame the, you know, the Kazakhstan no longer blames the Jews for everything. Now they do the running of the American, not the running of the Jew. And there's a scene in there where Borat dresses like what he would perceive a Jew to dress like, and goes to a synagogue and meets a nice elderly woman named Judith. or Judy, I think. And she's like, do I scare you? Like he was there dressed in like all these Jewish stereotypes. And her friend, they talked to him, and she's like, do you want a hug? And she's this really genuine person. And that was really kind of cool to see that. And then you had like the babysitter, because he ends up leaving tutor with the babysitter in the middle of the movie. And that babysitter like is trying to explain to her that she doesn't have to do what her dad says, that no one controls her, showing humanity and love and care and compassion and all of these things. And it's an interesting, it's an interesting situation, because it's showing humanity in the movie in a way that the first one didn't really do. But still, its intent was to showcase Trump's America from the view of Sacha Baron Cohen, which is massively satirical. So while I enjoyed the movie immensely, I didn't laugh as much as the first one. I felt that it took itself a little bit too seriously. I feel like it was a little bit sloppily directed. It was very hastily put together in order to get it out by election time, but that's not going to matter at all, because right now it's blowing up all over Twitter. People are doing Twitch watch parties because Amazon now allows you to do that, which is cool. And everything else. I don't know. I enjoyed it, but I just wanted to have like a quick thought about it. Not really a review, but just my thoughts about it. And maybe if you guys like this over reviews, I'll just do this where I just do these quick discussions, because I just want to talk about it and do that whole thing. Anyway, let me know your thoughts if you guys saw it, what you guys think. If you guys like the video, please leave it a thumbs up. Right now, the YouTube algorithm is just terrible. So the more interaction, the better. Thumbs up, leave a comment. I'll try to respond. And we'll talk again soon. Thank you guys very much. Have yourself a great day, and peace out.